Jacob Burton here from StellaCulinary.com, and in a previous video, we went over how to debone a chicken leg and thigh. So if you're unfamiliar with that technique, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Now in this video, we're going to take our boneless leg and thigh, and we're going to bond it together with another boneless leg and thigh using a enzyme called Transglutaminase. To give us a cohesive piece of meat that cooks more evenly and just is a nicer overall product. Now, in a previous video, I demonstrated a similar technique using Activa RM, which is a powder that you sprinkle on dry. Now, what we're using here is Activa GS, and this is made specifically for use in a slurry. Now, some people do sprinkle it on dry, but GS is much more efficient when used as a slurry, and it creates an extremely tight bond. So it's nice when putting together two larger pieces of meat that you want a cohesive bond on. So what I'm using here is a gram scale to measure out as much of the Activa GS as necessary for the project at hand. So it will vary depending upon how many pieces of meat you're gluing together. But what's important to remember is the ratio of 4 to 1. So for every 1 part of Activa GS by weight, you're going to need 4 parts of water. And a little bit of this stuff goes a long way. Here I'm using about 30 grams of the Activa GS. And I'm going to hydrate it into 120 grams of water, and I'm going to just get that blender blade going, and as I add in more and more GS, I'm going to work it up to its highest setting. And using a blender, you could use a whisk, but using a blender is just going to ensure that the Activa GS is fully hydrated and fully hydrated quickly. Now, the blending process does have one side effect, which is it incorporates a lot of air into the mixture. And if you have air bubbles incorporated into your slurry, what's going to happen is you're not going to get a very tight bond. So you can either let this sit in your refrigerator for a couple hours and most of the air bubbles will dissipate. A better option if you're in a professional kitchen and you have a chamber vacuum sealer is you want to remove any spacers that you have. And you're going to use the chamber vacuum sealer to pull it out. So you want to use the broadest container that can fit in your vacuum sealer. And you want to set your seal baller down to 0 because there's no use for it. You're not sealing a bag. And then you want to make sure that you have your finger on the stop button because this stuff will expand very quickly in the chamber and it will create quite a mess if you're not watching it. So you want to close the lid, run it through a cycle. Again, keep your finger on the stop button because as it starts to pull the air out, this slurry mixture is going to expand. And you can kind of see it here expanding. And right before it overflows from the container, I'm going to hit stop. It's going to evacuate the air from the chamber. And I'm going to continue this process anywhere from 2 to 5 times, depending upon how much slurry I have. But basically, I'm going to continue running the slurry through the chamber vacuum sealer until it becomes clear. At this point, when it's clear, I know that all the air bubbles have been pulled out. And now I can brush this onto whatever meat that I want to bind together in a very thin coating, and I know that I will get a really strong bond. So the next step is I have my boneless chicken leg and thighs, and I lay them skin side down on a sheet tray. I'm going to sprinkle with kosher salt for both seasoning, and also the salt is going to help retain some moisture during the cooking process. And I'm going to brush on a very even thin layer just on the meat side only because that's the side that we're going to be bonding. Now, once you've evenly coated all the meat, it's important to note how you actually place these together. Now, you're going to have an empty space of skin on every part of your chicken leg and thigh. This is where the knee joint was. So you want to take that empty place and invert it on the thigh meat as shown here. And what's going to happen is that's going to give you the most even piece of meat possible. So you want to go through and invert all of the thighs, leg and thighs together, basically just sandwich them. And then from here, we're going to finish the bonding process by wrapping in plastic wrap. Now, the rule of thumb when using Activa products or transglutaminase or meat glue in general is the tighter you can get the bond, the better. So I want to wrap these nice and tight in plastic wrap. I want to make sure that I'm taking care not to incorporate any air. I'm going to use the edges of my hand to press out as much air as possible. Now, if you don't have a chamber vacuum sealer, you can weight these down, and just putting a little bit of a weight on top of them is going to help to press them together. But you want to also do an envelope fold as shown here. So see how I'm kind of pressing out all the air, and then I flatten out one side with the edge of my hand. And then I'm going to reinforce that square shape by pressing in the other side with the edge of my hand. and then tightening the whole package together by folding the plastic wrap over the top. And this is going to give you a more even piece of meat that's going to cook more even, and also it's going to be a much nicer presentation. Now, once you have all of your envelopes wrapped up, you're going to place them into a vacuum seal bag. Again, if you have a chamber vacuum sealer, if not, just put a light weight on top of these guys. Let them hang out in your refrigerator overnight. But if you have a chamber vacuum sealer, you want to go ahead and seal these guys up. And I use about 40 seconds. So you want to get a nice hard seal, but not too hard, because if it's too hard of a seal, it's going to deform. Now, again, you can let these sit in your refrigerator overnight to bond, or you can cook them sous vide. Now, the thing is the actual enzyme will deactivate over 60 degrees Celsius. But as these leg and thigh portions come up to 60 degrees Celsius, that enzyme is going to hyperactivate. So basically, by the time these guys are done cooking, they're ready to serve. Now, here I actually did a little bit of Hollywood movie magic, where I had a different package pulled. So these are a little bit larger leg and thigh portions. But regardless, now they are finished cooking. They are sealed. I'm going to go through. I'm going to trim up the edges just for presentation. Now, save those edges. Those edges make the best staff meal ever. I mean, you cook those up, make like some orange chicken or sweet and sour chicken with them. But as you can see here, now we have our chicken leg and thighs that are bonded together, an even piece of meat that's now easy to serve. And because we sous vide them at 60 degrees Celsius for 4 hours, they're extremely moist, tender, and succulent. What one of my servers refers to it as the short rib of chicken. For more information, you can check out this episode's show notes at stellaculinary.com/KP31.